Hey, welcome back, y'all. Today we're back on this RM125 project, and what we're going to do in this episode is get these front forks rebuilt step by step, get the steering stem bearings replaced, and I'm going to change out this front tire. Stick around. Before you take the forks out, if you're going to rebuild the forks while they're still clamped into the clamps, loosen your top caps. Probably handled like a beast. Remember I told you that this guy just did these bearings, so he did a great job on them. There's fresh grease in there for sure. As you can see, the tapered roller bearing race is in the frame on the top where it's supposed to be. Obviously not so much on the bottom. Make sure that race is seated in there real well. And what I'm using is a seal and race driver tool. What that does is it fits over your race and lets you hammer it home. You can see the diameter is a little bit smaller than the race itself, so it can go inside the frame. Now we got to get this old bearing off. There's the race piece. So the inner race of the bearing is still stuck on the shaft. A couple ways to get these off. You can use a cutoff wheel, put like a little groove in them, and then use a chisel and kind of tap them off. Put a little bit of heat on them and use a chisel and tap them off. That's probably the way I'm going to go first. Because this bottom bearing is a pressed fit, it goes across the top, but it's not going to go on the bottom. You'd have to hammer this thing on or press it on. The easier way to do this at home would be to take this whole spindle, steering stem, throw this bad boy over in the freezer and leave it in there for an hour or so. Let it get good and cold. While we're waiting on our stem to freeze down, we'll get these forks rebuilt. Alright, let's get this fork apart, disassembled, inspected, cleaned, and rebuilt. let this drain for a few minutes. Next, we're going to separate the top cap from the inner piston. Now take this off over a drain pan because this is going to make a mess as well. Next, we're going to take our spring and our spring seat off, and there's a little snap ring in here. Next, we're going to take our bottom nut off. Using our same 13/16 or 21 millimeter, there's a lock nut. We need to break this free. Might be a little tough. They do have some Loctite on there. Again, it's imperative before you start this that all your adjusters are fully counterclockwise or in the softest position. We'll take this off and clean it. And now we'll just take off our end cap. We'll just kind of wiggle it. Now we can separate our inner and outer fork tubes, and that's basically done by taking this outer seal off. And now there's a little snap ring inside of there. We're going to take that off. Now at this point we just pull this hard and it should pull right out. This is your spring seat. At the end of the inner tube, we have a couple of anti-wear bands. You have a spacer, your fork seal, your snap ring, and then your outer dust seal. Now, just going to be careful taking these off. There's a little flat spot on the inside. Little screwdriver, just give it a twist, pull it off. Now, if these show like excessive wear, or the inside of the tube shows excessive wear, they need to be replaced. Pay attention to the orientation in which the seal comes off. If you put it backwards, you're definitely going to have leaks, but the inner cup of the seal should always face pressure. So there you have it. All the pieces are apart. Take it over to the parts washer or get some brake clean. Clean this stuff up real good. And I'll meet you back here to reassemble. Alright, I've got the fork all cleaned up inside and out. This is all the parts that you should have. Now we're ready to put this thing back together. I would strongly recommend, if you're doing these forks, to go ahead and get one of these fork bullets. They're like $5 or $6 or something like that. And the reason you want them, or the reason you want this tool, is the lip right here that holds the anti-friction bands is very, very sharp. It's a square edge, and when you try to put your seal on, you will more than likely damage it. In the book, they have a procedure where you put a very light, thin plastic bag over this, and then you can slide your seal on, and that works too. Absolutely. But I just prefer this. This basically just slides right over your fork end and covers up all those sharp edges. Now, before you start, get some fork oil in the cap or whatever, because we want to lubricate all these parts. First is going to be your dust seal. Next, there is your fork seal retainer. And then our fork seal itself. Like I said, keep track of the direction that the old one came off so that you can follow exactly how it goes. If you put it in backwards, the fork will leak. Once you get them on, you can go ahead and take your protector off and continue putting the pieces on. You have a spacer. The upper wear band. And the lower wear band. These do have a little bit of wear on them. They're not terrible. Next, we'll take our lower fork leg and let's drop in this little retainer. We'll make sure we get plenty of lubrication in here. And then the way we seat this piece, it's going to seat up against this little snap ring. We never took it out and don't need to. We'll use our fork tube to push it down. Now at this point we need to get our fork seal down inside the fork, and you need a fork seal driver for that. This is a 49mm fork tube. I do not have a dedicated one for this. I have one for the 48s. So what I will be using is my universal. As you can see, these little plastic fingers will push down on the outside of the seal, essentially seating it properly in the fork. This point here, you can drop down your retaining snap ring, and there's a groove in there. When you push this in, you should feel it snap in and click. That's important. Make sure the fork slides up and down nicely, and we can drop our dust seal on. And you can use your universal driver to tap that on as well. Next piece to go in is our spring seat. It's going to go with the metal towards the top. And then this inner chamber. First thing we want to look at is there at the end of this is like a lock nut, and this will spin on this shaft. You want to have at least 15mm of thread showing. If you don't, you could definitely damage it as you put this rebound adjuster in. Now this should thread all the way in. And then once it bottoms out, we'll tighten our lock nut against it. So at this point here, we are going to drop this piece down inside of our fork tube with the threads facing down. Just be careful not to damage anything. And we're looking for it to slide out the bottom. This little hex is going to fit down in the hex in there. And now we'll install this D-shaped tube. And as you can see, that's hitting. We want to turn that until it meshes up with the piece up inside of here, and it will drop in, and that meshes with our rebound adjuster, which is also D-shaped. So now at this point we'll stick this in the end and we'll turn it until it drops into that D-shaped tube, and we can now fully tighten this. Like I said before we started, you really needed to turn this rebound adjustment screw as far as you could counterclockwise. Now, if you skip that step, you may have an issue with threading this all the way down, in which case this would stop turning, and then you could just turn the screw back counterclockwise all the way until you could actually tighten this up. Now we're going to tighten this up to about 14 foot-pounds. Now at this point, we'll just thread it in. Tighten the center nut to 51 foot-pounds. Once all that stuff is installed, be sure that your fork slides freely and set it vertical on your bench. This point here is where the tricky part happens, because there's a special tool for this inner rod to hold this, because we need to pump this to get all the air out of it. So what they want you to do is lower this piece as far as it can go, and then you're going to fill that inner piece with oil, and we're going to pump it up and down a few times to get all the air out of it. I don't have that special tool, so what I'm going to use very gently is a pair of needle nose pliers to grab that and move it up and down. You don't want to grip this tube too tight, because the top adjuster makes a seal with this. If it sucks air, refill it. Then they're wanting you to do is pour fork oil now into this outer tube right to the top fork cylinder. I wouldn't go right to the top, because once you pump this a few times, you're gonna have to suck this out until it's about 179 millimeters from the top, and that's also going to require a special tool. And they want you to continue doing this until there are no air bubbles. And now we're going to suck out the excess fluid. What I use is this fork gauge tool. It's incrementally measured in millimeters. I've dropped it down to 179, 180 millimeters. Put this in the top of the tube, and we'll suck out the excess fluid. Once it sucks air, we know that the level of the fork oil is where they want it, below the bottom of the fork tube. So now we're ready to put the spring in, but we have to get this inner tube back up and out again. Gently pull this out. So gently pull it back out again. And we're going to put our spring in, and our tight coils are going to be towards the top. So after you drop your spring in, just take a quick measurement from the top of the fork tube all the way down to the top of the spring. They're calling for like 175 millimeters, which is like 6.8 inches. Now this one here measures out at about 6¼ inches. It's a little bit low. This is a 98, so more than likely these springs are collapsed just a little bit. And I'm not really going to worry about it too much. But if this thing's sticking way up, then your bottom seat is not properly installed. But as long as you're here, you should be good to go. We'll pull the center rod up, and we'll put like a 27 millimeter wrench. This is 1 1/16". That's what I've got. And this will hold this so we can get our spring retainer and snap ring back on. Next thing we got to do is fill our inner fork tube to about 10 millimeters below the top. Now the book is calling for us to tighten this to 43 foot-pounds. I have absolutely no way of doing that, so we're just going to give it the old ooga dooga, snug it up. Little fork oil on our O-ring, and we can raise our fork tube. Now we've got this lightly snugged. Remember, we're going to have to tighten this up once we get it into fork clamps. And that's pretty much it for these forks. Once we get them back in, we'll reset our compression and rebound adjusters to where they were, or just go 12 out, and you'll be in good shape. And we'll just go ahead and do the next one. All right, we got our stem cooling, which will shrink it. Normally what I will do is take my MAP gas and just warm up this inner race. But unfortunately, the way they've got this is this seal is part of this and it does not come off. So I can't do that. But heating this will expand it, help it to go together. If it won't go together with that, it shrunk and this one expanded, then we're going to have to press it on. But I'm going to hit it with my heat gun instead of a flame torch and warm this up. Now, if you don't use this little fancy trick maneuver deal, this bearing will not go down on there. You would actually have to put it in your press and press it on. It is a pressed fit. So this little trick works pretty nice. So I'm going to snug this up so that the bearings seat, and then we're just going to back this off until it rotates nice and freely. Just lightly snug this top nut. We don't want to tighten it up yet because we need to slide our forks through. Now when you slide your forks through, you want to bring the cap, the bottom of the cap, even with the top of the clamp. Just snug up the bottoms. Don't tighten these yet. We need to tighten these up. And you want to pay close attention to the two screws that are on here. The center screw is going to be your compression adjustment. The top screw is an air bleeder. You want that pointing straight up and away. So that's the highest point of the fork. That's where you can bleed your air out. Now before we tighten our top clamp bolts, we need to tighten the center nut bolt. Next, Suzuki brilliantly says to tighten the stem nut to 32.5 foot-pounds. I can't measure 0.5, so she's getting 32. Once that's tight and you feel no binding in your steering, torque your clamp bolts to 20 foot-pounds. Next, we gotta get this piston out. We gotta be real careful. She bites. You put a wrench or a paint stick or something. What we're gonna do is force some compressed air in, and we want to keep our fingers away from that piston. So we've got as a kit from All Balls. It's going to come with our two new rubbers. If you remember, one of them was missing. There's two seals in here. We'll just go ahead and dig those out. Now, for whatever reason, I don't know if I ordered a front kit or they just sent me a front kit by accident, but I've got a front kit, but fortunately the seals are the same size. First thing you want to look for is down in these grooves, any corrosion or anything that's built up, like old brake fluid will build up in there, and you can usually take a pick like this and just get down in there and kind of scrape that out and get it as clean as you can get it. Once we get it all cleaned up, we'll take it over to the parts washer, get all this stuff looking like brand spanky new. All right, we got everything cleaned up. We can reassemble it. It looks like somebody had broken this piece off, so and it was rubbing, so I don't know if we got a spacer issue. We'll have to look into that. And of course, if this bracket is not holding the caliper properly, I'm gonna have to replace it. Square cut. The larger square cut O-ring goes in first. Once it's in, make sure it's fully seated, not twisted. Then the smaller dust ring will go. And same with that. And we'll just kind of wiggle our piston in. Now there's a couple clips missing from this caliper, which obviously I didn't notice or didn't know before I took it apart. There is one that goes down in here, and then there's also like an anti-rattle clip that goes here. This bracket's rough. In a nutshell, that's a caliper rebuild. Your caliper should slide nice and easily on the pins. Now, I know it looks like nothing's changed from the intro, and you'd be absolutely right. All this stuff was done while I was doing the engine work. I just separated it into 2 different videos because it was getting kind of lengthy. However, I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you maybe learned something. Thank you all so much for your subscriptions, your likes, your comments, and your feedback. It's really appreciated. Thanks for watching, and I'm going to see you on the next one.